I found this fleece fabric at Walmart last week and I knew it had to become a seamwork Andy jacket. This pattern has welt patch pockets, elasticated hems along the main body and the sleeves, snap closures, and a cozy standing collar. I'm using a few special notions in this sew-along today: stretch interfacing for the plackets and undercollar, a bodkin to insert the elastic through the channels, and a snap clamp for the closures. Some of my favorite tried and true tools. I'll link them in the description below. I love the way this jacket turned out. I sewed a size 0 and shortened the sleeves by 2 inches. I hope you make a super cozy version too. Let's get started. Here is the wrong side of one of my front bodice pieces and I'm going to apply my interfacing. Aligning the outer edge of the interfacing with the center front edge of the bodice, making sure that the top of the interfacing starts 1/4 of an inch below the top raw edge of the bodice. Fuse in place. Repeat to apply both center front interfacings. Also apply your interfacing to the wrong side of your undercollar piece. Fold both of the short edges of your welt to the wrong side by 1/4 of an inch and give those edges a good press. Repeat for both welt pieces. Then we're going to finish one long edge for both of our welt pieces. Place this unfinished raw edge of the welt piece right sides together with the pocket, so the raw edge of the welt sits 1/2 of an inch below the raw edge of the indented portion of the pocket, and pin in place. Repeat for both welt and pocket pieces. Sew the welts to the pocket with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Fold your welt pieces over the top indented raw edges and to the wrong side of the pocket. And pin in place. Then we're going to edge stitch our welts in place, starting at the top of the short edge of the welt and down to pivot along the longer seam line and up along the short edge of the welt on the other side. Fold the top and side edges of the pocket to the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch. Place the wrong side of the pocket onto the right side of your front piece, aligning the raw edges for the side and the bottoms. The bottom inner edge of your pocket will align with the notch transferred onto the bodice. Pin in place all the way around. For the top and inner long edge of the pocket, we're going to sew edge stitching close to those folded edges. For the raw side edge and raw bottom edges, we're going to baste those edges in place. Repeat for both pocket and front bodice pieces. Place your front and back pieces right sides together and pin the shoulder seams. Sew your shoulder seams with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now I'll open out my front and back pieces away from each other, and I'll place my sleeve right sides together with these front and back pieces at the armhole and pin in place, repeating on both sides. Sew the sleeves in place on both sides with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Place the front and back pieces right sides together once again, as well as their sleeves. Pin the side seams and the underarm seams. Repeat for the opposite underarm and side seam. Sew from the bottom of the jacket across the underarm seam and to the bottom of the sleeve with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Be careful as you sew the opening of the pocket so that you don't catch the welt and sew the pocket shut. Repeat your sewing on both sides. Place your upper and under collar pieces right sides together and pin in place along the long unnotched edge. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Pin the short edges together and also sew those short edges at 3/8 of an inch. Now we can turn the collar right side out and give it a good press. Baste the open long raw edges together. Place the uninterfaced upper collar right sides together with the neckline. Align the raw edges and pin the outer finished edge of the collar at the notch on the front bodice. On both sides. Also align the notches on the collar with the shoulder seams and pin in place. Continue pinning across. Baste the collar in place. I've gone ahead and finished my center front edges from top to bottom using my serger, and I've done this on both sides. Now with our collar folded down and on top of the front bodice, we'll fold back the center front edges to the wrong side by 1.5 inches, and repeating on both sides. Pin those folded back edges in place along the top with the collar sandwiched in between. Sew straight across with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Turn the placket right side out. Give it a good press and pin in place. Repeat for both plackets. On both sides, we're going to sew from the collar seam down to the bottom of the garment with a 1.25 inch seam allowance. Along the very bottom of the jacket, I've gone ahead and finished the raw edges. Now we're going to fold the bottom edge of the jacket to the wrong side by 1.5 inches and give that a good press. I've pinned my hem in place. Now I'm going to sew it with a zigzag stitch right along my finishing stitches from one outer edge to the other, creating a casing for the elastic. I've cut the bottom elastic according to the chart in the pattern instructions. Lace the elastic through the bottom edge from one side to the other. I'm going to pin the elastic in place through the casing, making sure that the elastic inside the casing passes the top stitching of the placket by about 1/4 inch, as we're going to be top stitching in place right on top of our original placket top stitching to secure the elastic in place on the inside. Hand stitch those elastic openings closed just using a needle and thread. For the bottoms of both of my sleeves, I went ahead and finished the raw edges all the way around and folded the hem allowance to the wrong side by 1 3/8 inch. I'm going to zigzag stitch along my finishing stitches all the way around, leaving a 2-inch gap to insert the elastic, repeating for the bottoms of both sleeves. Lace the sleeve elastic through the opening in your stitches. Overlap the raw edges of the elastic and zigzag to secure. Repeat for both sleeves, pulling the elastic into the casing, and close the gap in your stitching, sewing along the original stitching line. Then we can attach our snaps according to the markings from the pattern piece. And now the jacket is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.